The skies above Winterfell were swollen with storm clouds the color of old iron, their bellies heavy with snow that refused to fall. Dawn should have gilded the battlements by now, yet only a wan gray seeped across the fields, teasing the turrets and broken crenellations, with hints of light that never quite arrived. Jon Snow stood atop the rampart facing the long dark funnel of the King's Road. Gloved fingers curled around the frozen merlons. Each breath misted before him, the vapor torn away by a wind as thin and razor-edged as a northern dirt. He watched the horizon as though it might confess its secrets if he stared hard enough, but nothing stirred save the distant shiver of skeletal trees beneath a hidden moon. Somewhere behind him a door groaned, hinges crying for oil, and boots scuffed against the stone walk. He did not turn. The soft cadence of those steps, light but purposeful, belonged to only one woman in Winterfell. Even before her cloak whispered close, he smelled her, smoke, warm sand from a continent he had scarcely known, and some sweeter spice he could never name, a scent like summers he had never tasted. "You did not come to bed," Daenerys said, voice muffled by the fur collar tied around her throat. "They tell me you have kept watch the entire night." Jon bowed his head but kept his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Someone has to see the darkness before it sees us." She joined him at the parapet, flaming torches from the yard far below painting restless shadows across her silver-gold hair. "The darkness knows exactly where we are," she murmured. "Our fires, our hearts. He can smell them even through a blizzard. Perhaps." Jon felt the ache in his lower back bloom as he straightened at last. "But I will not hide from it." Daenerys' gloved hand found his. She laced their chilled fingers as though that simple communion could hold back the night. Down in the courtyard, unsullied in gray wool cloaks, drilled in silent ranks, spears bobbing like reeds in wind. Dothraki horses stamped and tossed manes dusted white, breath steaming from flared nostrils. Northmen hammered new iron points onto pikes, or whispered half-remembered prayers by forge light. The whole of it, so many banners stitched to one fragile hope, looked alarmingly small from above. A single fist clenched against the void. "When dawn breaks," she said, "my children will be the point of our spear." Jon finally turned to her. "Let them rest. We will need Drogon and Rhaegal for the Night King himself. Save them for that. You fear losing them. I fear losing everything." He swallowed. "And I fear the Night King might like nothing better than to turn a dragon's fire cold. Viserion was ensorcelled because I believed him safe." A flicker of pain crossed her face, swift as a swallow's dart. "I will not repeat the mistake." Jon wanted to say that a mistake shared by two hearts becomes half a burden, but the sentence died behind his teeth. He still did not know how to speak to her without tasting every secret they had traded, his true name lying between them like a sword left unsheathed in snow. Instead he let the crunch of footsteps beneath them, the groan of timbers, and the occasional howl of a direwolf fill the silence. "Arya saw White scouting at the edge of the Wolfswood last night," he said at length. "One White has no eyes of its own," Daenerys answered. "It has the Night King's eyes." Jon shivered, though the wind had not grown colder. "Then he is closer than we guessed. All the more reason to strike first." He eyed her sidelong. The fire in her violet eyes gleamed with a hunger she scarcely concealed. If he closed his own, he could envision dragon wings slicing the murk, twin blazes carving paths of molten glass through an army of ice. But those same wings might also fan the flames of ancient northern distrust. Davos' warnings, Sansa's pursed mouth, Tyrion's measured counsel, all clamored in his memory. Power inspires awe and fear. "Let us bring the battle to him upon ground we choose," Daenerys pressed. "The dragons can scour the open plain and leave Winterfell behind undefended. The living will ride at our back," she countered. "The Northmen, the Unsullied, the Dothraki, every sword we command. Winterfell's walls are thick for a reason. Walls will not bar an enemy who can climb them with corpses." Jon's breath fumed faster. He knew the logic of her argument. He heard it in every war council Tyrion orchestrated. Yet something old and cold and stark inside him balked at abandoning ancestral stone. "I will not risk the chance that he slips past us. If he takes Winterfell a second time, we lose more than a fortress. we lose the heart of the north. And if we sit behind the walls, he surrounds us with dead, and starves us of hope." She stepped closer, the edge of her cloak brushing his knee. "Jon, I understand the weight of this castle in your blood. If I had my father's halls again, I would fight like fury to defend them. But there is more at stake than ghosts of forebears." She placed a palm on the frigid stone parapet. "Castles can be rebuilt. We cannot rebuild the living after the dead consume them." Neberstol. A raven flapped overhead, black wings slicing the gloom, and vanished beyond the western keeps. Jon traced its path until it dissolved into the iron clouds. "There is truth in what you say," he conceded. "And yet, I feel something else guiding me. The dead think no more of walls than water thinks of lines on a map. But my sister is right about one thing. Winterfell is not merely mortar. It is memory. The North drew breath in these courts before Aegon's conquest. Lose that, and we lose the North's soul. The Night King would savor that victory." "Namu better." Daenerys' gaze softened. "Then we will not lose it." He almost smiled. Her certainty could warm a frozen sea. "Swear it." She rested her brow against his. "I swear. By the Mother of Dragons and the Seventh Hell alike. Winterfell will stand when dawn is done." Frosty lips brushed his. It was a kiss more promise than passion. But it stirred embers in his chest all the same. He held her in silence, wrapping cloak over cloak, until the east began to glow a dim blue. The world below hushed, as though every soul sensed that the hour for words was dying, and the hour for steel drew near. When Daenerys withdrew, Jon caught her hand. "Ride with me tomorrow," he said. "We fly together. If we must meet him in the open, let it be us two at the tip of the spear." She laughed, the sound startling in that forbidding air. Two riders, two dragons, a song the world has never heard. Yet, Tyrion Lannister found them before first light faded. He ascended the stair in a flurry of wool and short, uneven breath. "Forgive the interruption," he wheezed, "but the Lady of Winterfell insists the lords assemble in the great hall at once." Fresh tracks in the eastern fields, large enough to belong only to creatures with wings. Daenerys straightened, eyes flaring. "Wyverns." "Something colder," Tyrion answered. "We must plan, my queen." Jon tightened his sword belt. Longclaw's wolf head hilt peeked from beneath the flap of his heavy cloak, its garnet eyes dim in the half-light. "Gather them," he said. "I will be there." "So will I," Daenerys declared, and strode for the stair. Tyrion lingered beside Jon, resting elbows against the parapet, peering toward the hidden horizon. "She will never retreat," he said under his breath. "Nor will the North," Jon replied. "Then let us hope your hearts can outlast the cold between them." Tyrion tapped Jon's mailed arm. "Come, my friend. If winter is knocking, let us greet it burning." The great hall exhaled ghosts of breath and the smell of damp fur as lords jostled for places along trestle tables cleared for maps. Candles guttered in tarnished holders, painting the stone ribs of the ceiling with flickering bars of gold. Samwell Tarly hunched over a parchment beside Gilly and Little Sam, scribbling notes in a rushed hand. Sansa paced at the head table, auburn hair braided like a warrior's knot, her voice steady as she fired questions at Sir Davos. Grey Worm stood sentinel near the hearth, spear butt grounded, shield kissed by ember light. As Jon entered, talk stuttered, then resumed in a lower, tauter key. Sansa wasted no greeting. "Scouts report bones of enormous birds, half buried in the snow to the east," she said. "Wingspans dwarfing any ravens. Could only be from the Night King's dragon. Vian. Viserion's bones are dust by now," Daenerys corrected, sweeping across the hall with Tyrion darting behind. "Whatever they saw, it was not a shell of my son. Perhaps they saw new mounts fashioned of dead flesh." Bran spoke from his wicker chair. His pale eyes watched them like morning over ice. "The Night King does not abide in action." Jon moved to Bran's side. "What else have you seen?" Bran's pupils dilated. For a moment Jon wondered if his brother looked not at him, but through him, into some ages-old shadow. "An arm of frost reaching for the heart of Winterfell," Bran murmured. a coronet of blue flame upon ancient battlements. Sansa's cheeks drained of what color the chill had spared. Prophecies again? Not prophecy, Bran answered. Memory of a day yet to pass. Tyrion cleared his throat. Let us not allow visions to steer our entire strategy. Hard intelligence still matters. We have hard intelligence, Arya interjected, sliding from the gloom near a column. I watched a column of white south of the Barrowlands 2 hours ago. 10,000 at least. They are marching straight for us. Liu. The warm crackle of logs seemed suddenly too loud. Jon faced the assembly. We can debate visions, but we cannot debate a legion of dead. We meet them where the fields narrow by the ridge. Light the trenches Brandon Stark laid when he built the first walls. Our dragons strike at the vanguard and snuff the threat before their numbers swallow us. Sansa's brow creased. We cannot afford to lose the dragons to some trick. No trick can extinguish dragon flame, Daenerys said, and her tone made some lords take an involuntary step back. Tyrion raised a placating hand. We must weigh every risk, my queen. If they do possess new monstrosities. Enough, Jon cut in. The longer we argue, the closer they crawl. We fly the dragons, but we fly them wisely. Drogon and Rhaegal scorch the dead, never lingering above their spears. The Unsullied hold the left flank with shields locked. Northmen and Knights of the Vale form the center. Dothraki ride the right with flaming arcs. We reserve the Kingsguard and Lyanna Mormont's men to defend the courtyard in case of breach. Ser Davos nodded. I'll see the trenches ignited the moment the first rank crosses. And the crypts? Gilly ventured, her voice quavering. Women and children remain below, Jon said. But... He gestured to Sam, armed with dragonglass daggers. The dead do not care for our chivalry. Sam lifted his quill in grim agreement. We have enough blades for 3 per family. Arya gave a curt nod. I will see them wielded properly. The council broke into motion then, each lord snapping orders, runners dashing out into blinding flurries. Jon lingered, hand braced on the north edge of the table where a tiny carved direwolf crouched beside the carved lion, kraken, and dragon. 3 beasts who had never before shared wood without blood. He traced the direwolf's back absent-mindedly. Brother, Bran said quietly, the Night King seeks you. Jon met those pale eyes. Then he will find me ready. Be wary. He has watched you through every raven's wing since you first crossed the wall. He knows your soul's fire. Jon's heart hammered. Why me? Bran's gaze drifted past him to Daenerys, who spoke with Grey Worm and hushed Valyrian near the hearth. Because you carry the blood that might rival his own breath. Jon frowned. I do not understand. You will. Bran reached out and clutched Jon's wrist. Despite the cripple's frailty, the grip felt anchored to something vaster than muscle. But in that hour, choose love, not steel. Jon wanted to ask more, yet Bran released him and rolled away with Podrick pushing the chair. The words lingered, unsettling as the hush before thunder. Snow came heavier by mid-morning, bat flakes swirling like ash from an unseen pyre. The battlefield east of the ramparts grew white, then gray beneath hundreds of lanterns. Trench lines wound like serpents across the plain, filled with oil and pitch, waiting for the spark. Jon paced the foremost ridge, feeling the ground's faint tremble, either from massive warhorses stamping or from something colder moving beneath the earth. Deer wolves howled in some far wood, their voices braided with the wind until one could not tell bone chill from dread. Rhaegal settled in a crash of talons upon the shallow rise at Jon's heel, great wings mantling against the gale. Drogon alighted beside him, dwarfed only by the rolling sky. Daenerys, clad in white and silver dragonscale mail, dismounted with agility. She brushed snowflakes from Rhaegal's flanks, murmuring in High Valyrian. Jon approached, his breath blocked by the awe that seized him each time he beheld dragons up close. As a boy, he had wondered whether the legends of Balerion were exaggerated tales to frighten children. Now he saw myth living, muscle, and flame behind eyes, bright as stars. He is restless, Daenerys said. So am I. Jon ran a gloved palm over Rhaegal's warm neck. The dragon's scales shifted, each as long as his hand, iridescent green edged with frost. But I feel it in him as well. A tremor, like something calling. Viserian's ghost, she whispered. They move his remains, Jon. I know it. If the Night King fashioned new beasts, we must be ready. We are ready, she said fiercely, and her eyes flicked to his. Do not doubt. He did not. But he doubted fate, doubted the brittle strands of prophecy that seemed always to coil around their ankles the moment a step was taken. He touched the pommel of Longclaw, the direwolf head winking in the half-light. A horn's deep call rolled across the plain. One blast, then another, a third. The signal for enemy sighted. Silence followed, even the wind paused. And then a sound like distant surf reached them. The crackle of ice underfoot, the drag of thousands of boots upon frozen soil. Jon vaulted into the saddle behind Rhaegal's neck, hands finding familiar grips. Daenerys sprang atop Drogon, her hair flaring white in the updraft. The dragons surged upward in unison, snow exploding beneath their wing beats. Jon's pulse thundered, tendons burned against saddle straps. The entire world shrank to the rhythm of Rhaegal's steady rise, the pounding of giant hearts that echoed against his own ribs. Below, torches kindled in waves. Shields lifted, spears aligned, flaming arcs ignited like a sweeping tide of orange through the snow. From this height, Jon saw the enemy for the first time. An undulating shadow stretching across the outer fields, every step crunching ice in eerie unison. Above them, swirling millions of snowflakes caught the pale sun, giving the monstrous procession a faint halo. In their midst rode pale riders upon dead horses, ice shards of cerulean flame. And at the center, cloaked in spines of frost, a figure taller than the rest, ornate crown fused to skull, arms spread like an enormous carrion bird. The Night King. Jon felt an invisible rope twang between them. The figure's head turned, face lifting to the sky. Across the impossible gulf, their eyes locked. Jon's blood froze. Rhaegal roared, a jet of fire boiling from cavernous jaws. The flame did not fall. Instead, it arched high, a defiant ribbon against gray. Drogon answered with a second torrent. The two infernos braided overhead, carving a wound of orange in the clouds. Below, thousands of corpses shuddered forward, white blades raised. Daenerys' voice crackled across the wind. Dracarys. They dove. Rhaegal's descent felt like the world tipping sideways. Jon hugged the ridge of scale, wind shearing tears from his eyes. He guided the dragon's neck with subtle shifts of weight. Muscles remembering old flight, though nerves screamed. Drogon plummeted beside them, wings corkscrewing, the queen's silver braids streaming like comet tails in his slipstream. The first blast of dragon flame hammered the dead's forward rank, vaporizing snow, melting ice, and shattering brittle bone. Bodies combusted, whirlwinds of smoke curling up from sundered torsos. Jon tasted ash, felt heat lash his cheeks. Yet the whites did not slow. Those behind simply clambered over charred remnants. A second pass, and a third. Trenches ignited as flaming arrows struck pitch, rings of fire clawing outward to cordon the undead. The night's false silence turned riotous. Iron on ice, humans screaming, dead screeching, dragons shrieking. And yet over that savage orchestra Jon sensed another note. Thin, plaintive, like a child's hummed lullaby. It slipped beneath the roar of dragons and the howl of wind, and lodged behind his sternum. Rhaegal's flight faltered an instant. The dragon's head jerked, wings shaking. Jon clutched torn ridges, scanning what had unsettled the beast. Then he felt it himself. A pull, as though some great maw opened in the void below, drawing flame and life into a heartbeat of silence. Jon, Daenerys shouted from Drogon's back, her voice lashing through the storm. He saw her pointing to the ridge opposite Winterfell. Black shapes reared there. 3 enormous rib-barred wings iced in frost, bodies stitched of bone and sinew glimmering blue. They were not dragons. They were something twisted, tortured into flight. Their chests yawned open, exposing cold heartstones that pulsed sapphire. Rhaegal shrieked. Fury and fear mingled. Drogon answered with a thunderous bellow. The undragons leapt skyward, wings cracking like splitting glaciers. Jon's stomach clenched. New monsters indeed. He angled Rhaegal toward the nearest abomination. The wind screamed in his ears. He drew Longclaw, though the blade meant little against a beast the size of a ship. But steel comforted. Flame burst from Rhaegal's throat, but the undragon banked, icy breath countering fire in a clash of vapor that crystallized midair. Snow scattered like shattered glass. The white beast whipped a tail spiked with shards, catching Rhaegal's shoulder. Jon lurched, nearly unseated. Pain roared through the dragon, echoed in Jon's own ribs as if they shared bone. Drogon barreled above, slamming into the second beast, claws raking. Daenerys leaned low, shouting orders in Valyrian. Scales and bones splintered. Yet the white stinged back, hooking barbed talons through Drogon's left wing membrane. Black blood splattered the air. The third undragon circled, empty eye sockets glowing ominous blue. Jon fought Rhaegal into a tight spiral, dodging another sweep of spined tail. He risked a glance below. The trench lines flickered like guttering candles, ranks of unsullied holding, Dothraki arcs of flame swarming the flank. But at the center of the undead host, the Night King remained still, arms lifted, as though conducting the aerial carnage with invisible strings. A savage resolve kindled in Jon's heart. Break the puppeteer, and the marionettes fall. He pressed knee to scale, guiding Rhaegal into a dive toward the king. Snow clawed his face. The ground surged up. He could see individual skulls staring from the dead mass. The Night King's face turned toward him. In that glacial gaze, Jon sensed more than hate, recognition. The villain welcomed him. 50 feet, 40. Rhaegal's lungs expanded. Furnace burning died. Yet before the flame could spew, the third white dragon slammed down from above, jaws locking onto Rhaegal's back ridge. The impact drove breath from Jon. Claws raked scale. Ice spread in fractal lightning across green hide. Rhaegal rolled, twisting, slamming into the white dragon. Jon clung desperately. They crashed into the dead horde, crushing a swath of whites beneath thousands of pounds of flesh and bone. Rhaegal's roar, white shrieks, steel on ice. A maelstrom of chaos erupted. Jon hit Snow hard, rolled, pain flaring through his shoulder. He staggered upright, Longclaw flashing. The white dragon rose in a grotesque serpentine motion, snapping broken wings. Its mouth yawned, exhaling a blizzard that turned rock to rime. Jon slashed at a leg as thick as tree trunk. Valyrian steel bit deep, black ichor spurted. The beast recoiled, screeching. Rhaegal launched from the mass of whites, tackling the abomination. Flame and ice clashed again. Steam clouded everything. Jon lost sight of them. When it cleared, the Night King stood 10 paces away. Jon's heartbeat slammed like a war drum. The enemy's icy armor caught torchlight, scintillating. His sword of black glass glinted at his side. No dead shielded him, only swirling snow. "Come then," Jon whispered. The Night King raised an arm. Whites surged forward. Jon sprinted, cutting down the first 2 corpses. Longclaw sang, white fire along its edge. He ducked an axe, slammed pommel into rotten jaw, shoved, stabbed. The dead fell. Others climbed over. Jon fought through them in blind ferocity. He barely noticed his own cuts, blood steaming in the air. He reached empty space. Except the Night King was gone. A shriek overhead drew his eyes. Drogon plummeted, a white dragon locked to his neck. Daenerys clung to her mount, hair whipping. Jon's heart lurched. He leapt atop a mound of dead, waving sword. Calling her name, the wind stole the sound. Drogon slammed into the ground a furlong beyond, sending snow billowing. The white dragon tore at shoulder muscle. Flames gouted harmlessly sideways. Jon ran tight. Every breath seared lungs, every stride heavy. He vaulted a fallen ballista, skidded over icy stone, hacked a white trying to gut him. Daenerys scrambled from Drogon's saddle as the great dragon rolled, trying to dislodge its foe. His roar was agony manifest. Jon gained the ridge just as the white dragon reared, jaws dripping frost. Daenerys drew a dragonglass dagger, utterly fearless, but dwarfed by her enemy. Jon hurled Longclaw with all his strength. The blade spun end over end, embedding deep into the undragon's eye socket. Blue flame erupted from the wound, flickered, then died. The beast convulsed. Drogon seized the moment, clamped teeth upon the undead skull, and with one heave tore it from its spine. Frozen vertebrae snapped like kindling. The corpse collapsed in a heap of shattered ice. Jon reached Daenerys, breath ragged. She stared at the slain monster, chest heaving, snow melting on her brow. "You threw your father's sword." "Borrowed," he panted. "Not lost." Drogon nudged the headless carcass, snarling. Rhaegal descended among spindly trees, battered but alive, trailing smoke from shredded wing skin. 3 living beings, 2 riders, the field still seething. But for a heartbeat, all else faded. Daenerys collapsed against Jon's chest. He wrapped arms around her, felt their hearts beating as wildly as dragon wings. And in that brief stillness, something shattered inside the storm. A strange hush, as if the air itself inhaled. They looked up. Above the enemy host, the Night King floated astride a whirlwind of snowflakes that rose like a throne of storm. His arms extended wide in triumph. The horde below erupted into fresh frenzy, rushing trenches with suicidal abandon. Flames struggled under the onslaught. Jon felt despair gnaw, but Daenerys shook him. "This is not the end," she hissed. "We have beaten one horror. We will beat the master of horrors." He closed his eyes, drew breath, let her fire kindle his own. When he opened them, resolve cut sharper than any blade. Together they mounted Drogon. Rhaegal flapped laboriously behind. Wounded yet willing, they soared again into battle's heart. 5 hours of night still stretched before dawn could attempt a resurrection of color. But for the living clinging to this battered patch of snow and stone, hope was measured now not in the turning of the world, but in the courage of 2 dragons, and the love between their riders. A love the Night King might not comprehend, yet would learn to fear. The long night pressed on, hour folding into hour, as blood and flame stitched a ghastly tapestry over Winterfell's stony cradle. Yet through it all, Jon and Daenerys fought as twin streaks of fire in the void, their fates interwoven like the braids of old Valyria and the banners of House Stark. And though ice sought to smother every glow, each time despair's crest rose highest, the dragons answered, roaring, defiant, reminding the darkness that the world still remembered warmth, and would remember it longer yet. Key. The clouds broke only to gather again, like wolves ranging back and forth before the lair of weary prey. In the pauses between gusts, one could taste the copper of spilled blood in the air, hot and metallic against the kindling scent of pitch fires and smoking drifts. Dawn, true dawn, was hours away. Yet the fields around Winterfell were already bright as noon in places where trench lines raged. Great wreaths of fire coiling skyward as if the earth itself tried to breathe flame. Everywhere else lay drowned in darkness so thick that men lost the shapes of their own hands before their faces. Swords rose, glimmered, vanished, shields rang and fell silent, and always the white eyes advanced without pulse or breath. Jon felt the ache in Rhaegal's wounded wing through the leather of his gloves. The dragon's labored climb flogged the wind into frenzied eddies that slapped at Jon's cheeks and stung his eyes. Yet the beast rose all the same, higher, angling across Drogon's contrail, until the 2 living fires flanked the storm throne that bore the Night King aloft. Snow swirled around that figure, whirling so sharply it seemed blades in orbit, each flake catching hint of cerulean radiance before spinning away into black. Jon shouted, though whether at his dragon or at the thing above, he hardly knew. Rhaegal's furnace swelled. Shudders rippled down those emerald ridges. Beside them, Drogon loosed a roar so deep it hollowed Jon's chest, and Daenerys leaned forward, pale braid whipping along her back like a banner of smoke-lit silver. Flame met the storm in twin sheaves, gold and green, boiling upward in a roar that drowned every other sound. For a heartbeat, the cyclone shrank beneath the onslaught, blue sparks sputtering at its heart. Then the Night King's outstretched palms closed, as if upon invisible bellows. The storm imploded, devouring the flame, and erupted outward twice as fierce, shards of hail and lances of razor ice bursting into the dragon's faces. Jon ducked as a spear of frozen vapor the size of a boar's tusk ripped past his shoulder, spinning glassy fragments across his cloak. Rhaegal shrieked and rolled. Drogon banked the other way, and the sky tore into two spirals of flailing wings. They recovered, but their momentum had broken. The Night King drifted higher, sailing upon his conjured zephyr like carrion on an updraft. Daenerys' voice cracked through the roar of wind. Again! But Jon felt the tremor in Rhaegal's muscles, pain and exhaustion gnawing at sinew already raked by undead talons. "Give him a breath," Jon called back, though his words whipped away like leaves. On the ground, unsullied phalanxes locked shields into a black iron wall. Each hopland's rim seemed to the next, formation bending around trench gaps in a giant crescent. The living dead smashed against them in waves, spilling over the fire lines where pitch had guttered. Grey Worm ordered stepwise delays, ranks falling back 5 paces at a horn call, luring the enemy deeper into heat and arrow range. Crossbowmen, atop Winterfell's inner walls, loosed quarrels tipped with dragonglass, shafts stitching the dark with brittle sparks each time they struck bone. Sansa stalked the battlements like a commander of old winter, cloak streaming scarlet behind brown leather edging. Whenever a breach yawned, she pointed, and the next hail of quarrels hammered that void until another layer of dead collapsed to plug it. Beside her, Podrick loaded a windlass in frantic rhythm, while Lady Lyanna Mormont shouted curses down the stone ladder, rallying men thrice her age. In the Godswood, Bran's wicker chair rested beneath the heart tree's weir of blood-red leaves. Eyes rolled pure white, skin aglow with moonsheen. He slipped through ravens like a shifting tide of black feathers. Each new perch gave him a shred more sight, but each wing beat carried the risk of blue fires subsuming his borrowed flesh. Still he searched the battlefield sprawl, looking for a thread of weakness in the Night King's weave. He found Arya first. She darted along collapsed barricades on the castle's eastern spur, blade of Valyrian steel catching stray torchlight in brief, silent flashes. One moment she was a shadow slipping through arrow loops. The next, she was among the dead, dagger-punching eye sockets, sword hamstringing whites before they sensed her. Then she was gone again, vanishing into smoke. In the black between breaths, she seemed predator rather than prey. Her dance so fluid Bran almost forgot the shriek of other souls. Yet he saw the number of whites piling there. More than a lone wolf should outrun for long. Bran pushed into another murder of ravens, minds tangling, wings buffeted by embers. He soared toward a ridge of barrels half hidden in snow. Gendry crouched there amid half-forged spearheads, swinging a hammer at a smoldering brazier to shatter ice between pickets. Beside him, Samwell Tarly fought with nowhere else to stand, dragonglass shortsword chopping clumsily, yet each stroke desperate enough to sever tendons. Bran let the ravens scatter and swept his sight westward, past the outer trench where armored Dothraki circled on living mounts. Their araks glowed orange, every cut leaving molten arcs that dimmed as bodies fell around them. But the horde grew thicker by the minute, dead piling in clots that slowed the living's circling rush. Drogon's earlier passes had burned swaths clear, yet those holes refilled with staggering corpses faster than men could breathe. One shadow loomed larger, an immense skinless giant whose ribs glimmered frost blue. It lumbered toward the inner gate, sledgehammer fists pounding bodies beneath its feet. Bran marked its path with dread. Lyanna Mormont watched too, jaw set with steel the smiths had never forged. Elsewhere, Tormund Giantsbane clambered atop a toppled ballista frame, scarlet beard caked with snow, and bellowed an insult that vanished under the roar. The giant cocked its head, then veered toward him, clearing 20 yards with 2 strides. Tormund leapt aside, and the giant plowed into crates of black powder. Davos had planned to relight those fuses once the dead pressed far enough. Fire burst upward in a pillar that lit the night as bright as summer noon. Flame engulfed the giant's chest, ribs glistened, cracking. But the behemoth kept walking through the inferno, dragging pieces of cart still aflame. Bran felt the jolt of hopelessness ripple through men who witnessed the thing's persistence. He flew higher, scanning for whatever tether bound that corpse to the Night King. Then he saw it, a faint thread of pale sapphire, thin as spider silk, snaking from the giant's spine toward the Stormthorn high above the field. Bran followed that thread with his borrowed eyes, weaving among gusts, until he all but touched the crown of unnatural ice. The Night King's head snapped sideways. Blue eyes pierced Bran's raven, and frost flared within its fragile bones. The bird imploded. So did every other raven carrying Bran's thoughts. Bran reeled in the godswood, heart hammering, frost bleeding from his nostrils. A shadow deeper than night hung over him, and for a terror-lanced instant, he swore he felt the Night King looking through his own eyes. Then the sensation withdrew, but its chill lingered like poison. Hodor's loss had taught Bran pain. Summer's death had taught him loneliness. This brush taught him a new flavor, the certainty that a wrong step would erase him from every memory the world carried. He blinked, severing the last threads, and whispered, "Choose love, Jon." The wind stole the prayer. Tyrion ran across the second courtyard with snow crunched high about his knees. Ice water seeped into his boots, though he had stuffed the left one with straw after it split near the sole the previous day. Each breath tore his lungs, and dignity had long since fled the palace of his mind, hiding behind hedges of fear and self-loathing. But he ran anyway, because 20 feet behind him shambled 3 wights missed by gray worms screening spears. Their hollow moans were wet, as though fluid still clung to lung and throat. He darted under a portcullis half jammed by fallen masonry, crawled, scraped palms. Snow spit into his beard. On the far side, Brienne of Tarth whirled Oathkeeper in a scarlet blur, carving the head from a white walk. One of the taller lieutenants, crystalline spear raised. Its death rang like a bell. Shards burst outward, clattering across courtyard stones. Half-melted drizzle spattered Tyrion's cheek as he lurched up, wheezing. Brienne pivoted just in time to see the 3 wights clamoring under the portcullis after him. She met them with 2 sweeping cuts. The first decapitating the lead corpse. The second splitting a clavicle. Podrick barreled in behind, pike thrusting the last white square in the eye socket. It toppled, twitching. Tyrion collapsed against a pillar, stomach threatening revolt. "My lord Hand," Brienne said, voice calm enough to shame his panic. "The Queen might wish her counselor safe below." Tyrion spat ice. "The Queen can wish many things, wine chief among them." She nudged the fallen lieutenant's crystal spear with a boot. "Lucky I was near." "Luck," Tyrion echoed. "Or idiots, learning to carry themselves small." He hefted a dragon-glass dirk Sansa had pressed upon him earlier. "Tell me, Sir Brienne, can we push them back?" "Low on reserves," she answered. "But the Hound leads a sortie now to relieve the south ramp. If it holds, we may re-anchor the line." Tyrion exhaled, a puff of misery. "Every plan is another finger in the dam." "Then keep plugging fingers," she said, and strode off toward fresh screams. Tyrion staggered through slush toward the crypt stair, intent on relaying Brienne's news to Sansa. Yet each step seemed steeper than the last, and when he reached the descent, every torch had guttered out. Cold darkness yawned below like the promise of a grave. For one heartbeat he nearly turned, but Sansa might be there, organizing cowering children, and he had seen what guilt could do when left unspoken. So he descended, dragonglass shaking in numb grip. High overhead, Drogon leveled his flight and began a long gliding turn, his body bright with chinks of frozen gore. Daenerys leaned low to the saddle harness, feeling the tremble in each fiber of the great beast's wound-scored frame. Blood seeped at 4 rents near his spine. Already it clotted to black tar in the deepening cold. Every spasm of injured muscle rippled under her thighs. She stroked burnished scale harder than steel. "Hold, brave one," she whispered. "Hold a while yet." Jon ranged Drogon's flank, Rhaegal's breaths gusting harsher every minute. They could not stay aloft long. Gravity weighed upon wounded wings like guilt on a kneeling man. But if they landed, the dead would swarm. And below, nothing but a thin crescent of unsullied still glowed red behind the trench line. The Dothraki wheel had faltered. Riders chopped at sea of arms clawing for stirrups. The Vale center bent like a bowstring. Farther back, Greyjoy sailors under Theon held their flank at the Weirwood Canal. But their line was thin, and the canal itself freezing into climbable shelves. Joan's eyes, pale as snowfall, found hers across the night. He gestured down and forward, toward the giant battering Winterfell's gate. She shook her head, Drogon wounded. But Jon made the gesture again, insistent. She studied the gate, timber beams crumpling, splinters flying with each gigantic fist. If that breach opened, the living bled from two fronts. She tightened jaw, then signaled ascent. Their dragons dipped together, wings beating with waning vigor. Down they plunged through drifting ash, swinging wide of trebuchet frames frozen into grotesque antlers. The giant loomed, half enkindled by Davos powder trap, stomach cavity a lantern of embers. One eye socket still dripped molten fat and glowing frost. Yet it smashed timber again, shrieking in some ancient rage. Drogon banked behind it. Daenerys rose in her stirrups, drawing breath through teeth. Fire burst from Drogon's throat, white-hot, streaming over the giant's spine and melting ice plates in seconds. Jon and Rhaegal soared at opposite angle, torching the gap between giant and main horde, so defenders could clear away. Snow vaporized. Men shouted pleasure for the first time since the moon's rise. The giant turned as Drogon's fire abated, charred vertebrae cracking audible even above the roar. Its right arm broke off at the shoulder, smoldering. Yet the thing's left hand seized the edge of a battered parapet and heaved. Stone groaned. The wall gave, spilling rubble outward. The gate itself, torn in two, sagged beneath its own bent hinges. Now, Jon bellowed from Rhaegal's neck. He threaded flame straight into the thing's open chest. Dragonglass embedded there. Some shard of ancient ice, shattered. The glow inside winked out like a candle pinched by wet fingers. The giant shuddered and collapsed, shaking earth enough to topple two siege towers. A cheer rippled. But through the dust riders of the Night King renewed their push, threading between heaps of newly fallen corpses. Firewalls dwindled as snow smothered pitch. And overhead the Night King's storm throbbed a deeper hue, like a bruise settling. Arya ducked under a lance of bone, spine colliding with frigid stone. She sucked in air so cold it sliced her throat raw. The White Rider turned its skeletal horse with jerky movements, eye flames guttering, and jabbed again. Arya twisted, blade flashing. Valyrian steel met bone at the elbow, and severed it in a flare of dust. The horse bucked, throwing corpse onto spear litter. Arya kicked free, rolled, and sprinted toward a tumbled battlement gap. One narrow chute into Winterfell's inner court. She emerged amid chaos. Sacks of flour ripped open by stray arrows, flour coating snow like chalk. A hog carcass swung from a gibbet, half carved for rations, now hammered by hailstones. Two Karstark men dragged barrels of arrows toward an overturned brazier. They swore when they saw her but pushed on. Something felt wrong. Too quiet in this pocket behind the din. She turned a half circle, eyes scanning shadow. There, 3 feet behind the hog carcass, a patch of black deeper than the rest. She stepped lightly. Snow muted under padded boots. The shadow moved. A child, no taller than her waist, skin pallid, eyes blazing blue. Little Sam. No. Little Sam was safe in the crypt. The creature hissed, baring needle teeth. Arya's senses narrowed to a pinpoint. She swung the dagger in an arcing flick, and opened its throat before the hiss ended. A gout of ice vapor spurted. The small corpse crumpled. Behind it 4 more small figures scuttled from torn flour sacks, limbs angular and wrong. So the dead scaled the walls through rat holes now. She braced, but at that same breath, thunder cracked above the keep. She looked up. The Night King descended from his whirlwind. He drifted past the topmost turret, like silent lightning, cloak unfurling behind a crown of jagged ice that trailed pale contrails of breath. Every living head near Arya snapped skyward. A hush swallowed screams. Even the dying paused. He touched rampart stone without sound. Ice rippled from his boots, frosting crenellations. Then he raised his arms. Blue light pulsed from him in slow tide. Arya felt the hair on her arms lift. All along the inner walls corpses twitched. Some belonged to allies fallen minutes ago. Northern farmers, and proud free folk cut down but not yet burned. They rose with empty eyes. Arya sprinted. A pathway to the godswood lay half buried under debris, but she knew its every curve. She had run it 1,000 times as girl and ghost at night. Her feet skimmed stone gnarled by frost. Behind, moans, clang of steel. The first living men realizing their own fallen now fought them. She passed the stables. Fires raged inside. Penned horses broken free, screaming as dead bit haunch or throat. A wheel of sparks shot skyward as a lantern shattered. Arya leapt a burning beam and landed inches from a sled packed with barrels of lamp oil. Without thought, she slashed its lashings. The sled lurched, spilled casks. Oil splashed across straw and timber like black rain. She kicked an ember from the burning beam onto the spill. An orange tongue licked out, racing across the sled. Whoosh! Fire chased her down the alley as she vaulted the next wall, leaving a wall of burning oil behind to slow the new risen dead. Wind knifed her face when she gained the godswood's outer arch. Snow hung in the leaves like sickly blooms. She skidded onto the familiar path, pulse pounding in ears louder than battle. Ahead, the weirwood glowed phantom red, and beneath it, Bran, still motionless. She was halfway across the glade when Theon Greyjoy stepped from behind a trunk, spear leveled. "Arya," he croaked. "All quiet here. For now," she answered, panting. "But he's inside the walls. Bran's not safe." Theon's face flickered with old guilt, old fire. "Stay, then. Help hold the arch." "No. Someone must kill him." Theon almost smiled. "Been trying to do that with my shame. Most of my life." She touched his arm, perhaps the first kindness she'd offered Theon Greyjoy since she was 9. "Guard him well, Theon." She turned, ready to sprint back into hell. Bran's voice stopped her, soft yet ringing. "The sword you carry, sister. It is death's blind spot." She looked to him. His eyes were still white. "Then point my feet. North Tower." Bran murmured. "He climbs for the rookery." Arya nodded once and flowed back into moonless snow. In the crypt, darkness pressed against the very sparks of torch flame as crowds huddled among sarcophagi. Sansa moved like a wraith through rows of women, children, and the aged gripping shoulders, murmuring comfort she half believed. Maester Walken tended a fisher lad whose leg had shattered under a wagon wheel early in the siege. The boy whimpered, sweat beading though breath frosted. Cracks boomed overhead, stone shearing in the keep as siege impacts struck. Sansa paused at the statue of Lyanna Stark, rose petals long since blown away. At the base sat Tyrion, cheeks mottled pink from cold and exertion. He looked up, expression wry. "I see the Dragon Queen's hand is safer than her head," she said, voice low. He tipped an invisible goblet. "Safer, yes. Relaxed." "Hardly." A thud shuddered through the crypt. Dust trickled from a ceiling arch. Sansa's gaze traced the arch curve. "You brought news?" Tyrion nodded. "Brienne says the south ramp may hold if the Hound succeeds. But fresh dead rise inside the walls. Your sister hunts the source." Relief, pride, and terror mingled in Sansa's ribs. She knelt beside Tyrion. "Arya can handle herself. So can the Night King, I hear." They shared a hollow laugh. Another tremor shook the floor. Somewhere a child began to cry. Her mother shushed, voice tight. "If the walls fall," Sansa whispered. "What then?" Tyrion fingered the dragonglass dirk at his belt. "We improvise. The Lannister specialty." Her gaze slid to the old bones behind each stone effigy. North remembered. Or so men said. Sansa wondered how many dead lay still behind those carved visages. Another jolt above, dust rained. A fissure opened along the barrel vault, hairline but growing. Sansa's stomach turned to ice. "Down here they'll have us like fish in a barrel if this roof fails. Then we dig out," Tyrion muttered, though his eyes betrayed the lie. The cry of the child sharpened into a wail. Another voice hissed warning. All around the crypt ash fell in slow flurries, though no fire burned. Tiny flakes of ice? No, stone dust. Then silence fractured. With a grinding scream, the vault's center ridge buckled. Cracks raced like lightning. Sansa dragged Tyrion to his feet as people shrieked. The ceiling did not collapse, but a chunk the size of a dog fell and shattered. Through the fresh hole, something cold drifted, blue motes like fireflies, pulsing. Fire! Sansa yelled, thrusting torches toward arch pillars. Unsure hands obeyed. Smoke billowed, but blue motes sank still. Tyrion's eyes widened. They're not falling stone. What then? A second stone chunk split, bounced off a sarcophagus, cracked open a skull whose owner had lain 300 years. Air stinking of earth and rot exhaled upward. One pale hand gripped the edge of the broken sarcophagus. Fingers of desiccated flesh and yellow bone. Screams pitched higher. Tyrion shoved Sansa behind him. Ancient men and women were climbing out of their graves. Jon guided Rhaegal through a slow circle above the godswood, breath plume thick. He saw Bran beneath the heart tree, Theon and half a dozen Ironborn, forming a ragged ring. But he also saw shapes climbing the wall behind them, forms with blue torches in eye sockets, scaling as spiders. Rhaegal banked. A stabbing jolt of pain knifed the dragon's wing as wind caught the torn membrane. Jon felt it in his own muscle. A sympathetic echo. Rhaegal's altitude dropped. Snowy branches slapped claws across scale. They must land soon. On the far side of the inner yard, Drogon perched on a ruined tower stump. Daenerys dismounted and helped Grey Worm cut a fresh path to reinforce the breached gate. Her white cloak billowed, blood spattered but still bright. Jon's heart surged, an ache beyond wounds. She glanced up, met his eyes. He signaled, "Bran in danger." She nodded once, as though she'd heard his very thought, and sprinted for Drogon again. Jon aimed Rhaegal toward a collapsed walkway near the Godswood Arch. The dragon landed hard, claws gouging stone, voice rumbling misery. Jon slid to snow, drawing a spare dragonglass pike bound to the saddle rig. He patted Rhaegal's jaw. "Rest. Guard this pass." Rhaegal snorted steam, settling wings over bruised side like a wounded hawk. Jon vaulted fallen timber, sprinted. The arch ahead churned with living Ironborn and dead alike. Theon's spear licked back and forth, jabbing eyes, throat, heart. But for every white pierced two more climbed the marble path. Jon roared, swinging the pike in broad sweep. Bone cracked. He fought beside Theon, two spears weaving cage around Bran. Ironborn fell. Jon glimpsed Quent, the Salt Wife's son, vanish under Talon hands. Bran whispered prayer or prophecy. Jon could not hear. Behind the whites, the storm parted. The Night King strode into the Godswood. Jon stepped forward. Steel met ice. His breath froze before leaving mouth. Daenerys rose skyward again, though dim awareness told her Drogon's breath shortened. She could not help that now. She wheeled toward the bronze cannon tower above the rookery. There, blue lightning flickered across broken parapet stones. The Night King's signal. If Jon had not reached Bran yet, she must. As Drogon beat over the north tower, a shape burst from the highest window. One of the white dragons she'd thought slain. Its head hung half-severed, yet some sorcery dragged it into motion again. It leapt, latched onto Drogon's belly. Talons punctured scale. Drogon shrieked, wings faltered. They tumbled sideways. Daenerys clung to harness, but slipped partway free, legs dangling above hard stone, 300 feet below. She drew the dragonglass dagger still sheathed at her hip. With a roar of her own, she stabbed downward, once, twice, into the undead neck locked against Drogon's breastplate. Black ice cracked. Ikor hissed. Drogon twisted, using gravity to slam the white dragon against the tower's jagged stump. Bones shattered like pottery. Daenerys' right glove shredded. Blood slicked her palm. Again, she stabbed. The white skull finally split, blue fire guttering out. It fell away, shattering rooftops. Drogon righted, but shivered with new wounds. Daenerys kissed his neck scales. "Not yet, my friend. Hold one more storm." She guided him to land inside the tower remains, a ragged circle of stone open to the sky. There, She could rest and still leap skyward. She clambered off, muscles screaming. Below, the godswood shone with ephemeral blue halos. She saw Jon facing the Night King, saw Bran behind him. She realized she could not reach them in time by air or foot. But if the Night King fell, his spell would break. She must help Jon there. She looked about the tower. A toppled ballista, shaft intact, head missing. She envisioned hurling the 15-foot spar like a javelin from Drogon's back. Drogon's back. Might it reach? She dragged the spar into the open ring. Too heavy, but Drogon might bear it. She tied a loop of rope round its center, lashed the other end to Drogon's girth strap. They died. As she struggled through knots with numbing fingers, a scraping echoed behind, like stone grinding. She spun. Out of a ruined doorway crawled a figure half encased in frost. Ser Jorah Mormont, or what remained. Flesh gray, eyes blue. Dragonglass still jutted from his stomach where he had fallen, but evidently not burned. Her breath hitched. Jorah, she whispered. The wight lunged. She leapt aside, seizing the spar's butt. His sword, once her protector's proud blade, whistled past her ear. She rammed the spar's blunt end into his chest. He staggered but swung again, shearing a patch of her cloak. Tears stung her cheeks. Whined her sorrow. She could not tell. She spun the spar, smacking his wrist. Fingers snapped. Yet he advanced, uncaring. Daenerys dove for the dagger at her waist, but it had fallen in the earlier tumble. No time. The spar's dragonglass tip? Missing. She backed to Drogon's shoulder. Jorah's white-raised sword. Drogon's head snaked round. Chomp. His jaws closed over Jorah's torso. Crunch. Frosted limbs dangled, flailed, then fell limp as blue fire winked out. Drogon hurled the body into the void below. Daenerys pressed her brow to the dragon's, tears spilling freely now. Grief for the man she'd lost twice. The tether rope tugged. She rose, scrubbed cheeks. Easy. They lumbered skyward again, spar swinging like a pendulum. She angled Drogon over the godswood, heart hammering. Snow and ash whirled, wind shrieked. Below, Jon traded blows with the Night King, Longclaw back in his grasp. Sparks flared each time Black Blade met Ice Spear, but Jon's parry slowed. His left arm hung limp from earlier wounds. The Night King pressed. Daenerys drew breath, steered Drogon into a dive that flattened her stomach to the saddle. 50 yards. 40. She braced the spar against her thigh, aiming its shattered butt like a lance. The Night King's back faced her. Blue crown gleamed moonbright. She screamed a wordless battle cry. Drogon curled wings, sudden deceleration pulsed through her spine. The spar hurtled loose, spinning end over end. It flew straight. Then the Night King turned, spear hand flicking. A wave of blue force rippled outward. The spar exploded midair, shards scattering harmless. Drogon shrieked, wings buffeted by the same pulse. Daenerys clung, but the dragon's battered frame twisted. One wing clipped a turret stump. Membrane tore. They spiraled. She felt the world swim. Drogon fought for lift, but crashed onto a heap of broken siege stones outside the godswood, snow pluming. Stars burst behind her eyelids. She crawled from beneath half-draped harness. Drogon lay panting, chest heaving, wing mangled. He could not rise. The Night King glided forward, spear dripping cold light. Jon knelt, breathing in ragged gasps, blood-flecking lips. Daenerys, dizzy, reached for dragonglass shards from the shattered spar, found one the length of her forearm. She staggered between him and Jon. Snow fell in thick silence. The Night King paused. His eyes swept over her, curious, almost amused. He flicked the spear tip at her chest, lightly, as though testing porcelain. The dragonglass spearhead on his weapon pulsed sapphire. Daenerys tightened fingers on her shard. Jon groaned behind her, trying to stand, but his leg buckled. Theon's remaining Ironborn lay motionless in red snow. Bran watched, face calm but blood trickling from one nostril. "You will have nothing," Daenerys hissed in Valyrian. Not my dragons. Not my realm. Not my love. The Night King tilted his head. Snow hissed as it hit his shoulders and vaporized. He raised the spear overhead. A shadow blurred past Daenerys' right ear. A flash of steel. Arya lunged from the darkness of a broken wall, Valyrian dagger aimed at the Night King's back. His left hand snapped up with impossible speed, choking her throat mid-air. Arya's blade slipped from fingers, or seemed to. It fell, but her left hand shot up, snatching it mid-drop. She shoved the point toward his belly. But this time the Night King twisted, catching her wrist inches short. Blue fire crawled along his fingers toward her skin. Arya's scream bit through the night. Jon cried out her name, dragging himself forward. Bran's eyes opened, pupils dark again. His voice, loud as dawn bells, rang. "Choose love." Ice rippled from the Night King's palm into Arya's veins. Her lips blew. She gurgled. Daenerys' dragon glass shard, still clenched, surged forward. She rammed the shard into the joint between spear shaft and blade. A crack popped like splitting oak. The sapphire spearhead shattered. Blue fire roared outward in concentric rings. Jon, Arya, Daenerys, Bran, all blasted back. Pain lanced through Daenerys' ribs as she hit stone. The Night King's body juddered. Frost flaked from his shoulders. He looked down at the broken spear, then at Daenerys. Something like confusion flickered across that ancient face. He stepped toward her. Jon hauled himself upright, picked up Longclaw, and lurched between them. He met Daenerys' eyes, fear and love intermingled, and whispered, "Together." He raised Longclaw two-handed, though his left screamed. Daenerys wrapped her hand over his on the hilt. Blue sparks crackled around the Night King's fingers as he formed a new blade of ice. He lunged. Jon and Daenerys swung as one. Valyrian steel met conjured ice. For an instant, both swords locked. Longclaw's wolf-head pommel glowed, molten red running the fuller. Then ice split from hilt to point. The Night King's blade shattered in a spray of crystal shards. Blue fire raced down his arms, fracturing. He staggered. Jon pivoted, drove Longclaw through the Night King's chest where the jagged crown met flesh. Daenerys pressed her palm to the blade's flat, shoving with all her weight. Steel slid until guard-kissed ice ribs. The Night King's eyes widened. Blue fire within flickered, then flared brilliant. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Snow hung motionless in air. Flames froze mid-curl. Breath halted between lungs and sky. Then the Night King exploded in a storm of blue light. It tore upward, shredding clouds. A shockwave rolled across Winterfell so fierce torches bent outward. Every dead thing on the field froze, cracked, collapsed. The storm overhead dissipated as though sucked into a sinkhole. Dawn's first blush washed the horizon. Silence poured across the battlefield. Thick, deafening. Jon, Daenerys, and Arya knelt upon broken stones, shards of ice drifting like spent petals about them. Bran sat beneath the heart tree, eyes shining as sun found the world. Wind sighed through weirwood leaves, newly red against the whitening sky. Across Winterfell's smoking sprawl, living men and women straightened from crouches of terror. Disbelief chiseled on soot-striped faces. The Unsullied dropped shield wall to knees they never bent. Northmen stared at hands suddenly still, weapons dripping only thawing frost. Dothraki raised torn arcs, ululating with ragged voices. In the courtyard, Brienne tugged helmet free, tears streaking grime. Ghost limped from a rubble pile and howled a long, aching note that echoed off ramparts. In the crypt, whites of ancient Stark kings toppled mid-stride, bones scattering like decades-late confetti. Sansa, Tyrion, and huddled refugees blinked at sudden peace. Above all, dawn spread gold across a sky washed clean of violet storms. Light kissed each blade of grass, those uncharred, melting frost into dew. Jon wiped the rim of Longclaw on his torn cloak, then let the sword drop. He reached to Daenerys. She clasped his forearm. He pulled her to standing. Her knees trembled. He wrapped arms around her and held until their shudders calmed. Arya coughed. color seeping back to cheeks. Jon touched her hair. "Little sister, you have cat paws." She managed half a smirk. "Wolf claws too." Bran's wicker chair creaked forward, pushed by Theon. "Bloody but alive." Bran lifted his gaze to Jon and Daenerys. "All living songs now wait for a new verse," he said. "Sing wisely." Jon looked over the ruin. Trenches smoking, towers cracked, dragons bleeding but living. He met Daenerys' eyes, found in them mirrored exhaustion and tempered flame. "We'll rebuild," he murmured. She nodded, tears bright. "Together." And though the scars of night would linger across Winterfell stones and across their own hearts, they would indeed rebuild. For the first rosy light of true dawn glimmered upon the snow, not as a promise alone, but as proof. The long night had broken, not by cold steel or dragon's fire alone, but by the fierce weave of hearts that would not let each other fall. Beyond the walls, wind carried away the last cinders of blue flame. In their place rose faint lark song, timid but insistent, the first birds of morning daring again to greet the sky. The dawn that broke over Winterfell bled slowly into a long, tremulous morning, like an invalid rising from bed after fever. A crimson stain smoldered along the eastern horizon where cloud banks still clung, their undersides bruised violet, and every shattered parapet, every slumping mound of snow, every spear half buried in churned mud, glittered with faint diamond droplets as frost surrendered to pinkish light. The once white field outside the walls had become a grotesque topography of ruin. Charred craters where siege towers had burned, yawning ditches half filled with blackened corpses, splintered wagons whose rims now served as perches for exhausted ravens. Yet amid that devastation small, improbable sparks of life flickered. A stable boy stooped to lift a foal from under a collapsed beam. Two maesters scoured the ash for their fallen satchels of healing herbs. A pair of sworn sisters in tattered white cloaks sang a northern lullaby as they bound one another's wounds with strips torn from a banner that only hours before had flown over the main gate. Jon Snow traced that broken world from the high walkway above the courtyard, each new sight carving strange hollows inside his chest, hollows of grief so bone-deep they felt older than his own years, and hollows of dawning wonder that the sun still managed to warm his cheeks at all. Wind tugged at the tatters of the black cloak he had donned again, a ceremonial relic of the Night's Watch rendered nearly unrecognizable by rips and scorch marks. The crows that had once stood beside him on the wall were gone now, lost to daggers, wights, or the merciless attrition of innumerable miles. He alone survived to look upon what their vows had foretold. The Night's Watch had held for thousands of years against a shadow no one truly believed still walked. When that shadow finally did, it was old Castle Black's lost wolf pup, reborn a dragon rider, who broke it. Yet he did not feel triumphant. Triumph, he decided, belonged to songs sung decades later, when blood had dried and memory smoothed the ragged edges of truth. In the moment itself, there was only exhaustion and questions clattering louder than any victory horn. He braced a palm on the pitted Merlon. Down in the yard, gray worms remaining unsullied formed ranks of wounded and uninjured alike, silent as ever, readying to patrol the perimeter in case roaming dead still lurked beyond sight. Their discipline soothed him. A fixed, unwavering point in a world spun halfway to madness. To the south, a long queue of northern farmers and small folk wound across the bailey toward a makeshift medic tent, where Samwell Tarly, face sticky with soot, directed triage like a reluctant general of leeches and bandages. Gilly handed him fresh linen. Little Sam toddled between benches, offering water ladles to grim-faced men with limbs in slings. Sir Davos hovered nearby, tallying stores with an abacus and the stern patience of a septon coaxing children. Jon's gaze drifted then to the godswood. He could not see Bran from here, only the carved face of the weirwood, its tears of sap congealing like rubies down the pale trunk. Whatever communion Bran now sustained with those red leaves lay beyond Jon's mortal senses, yet Jon felt the gravity of it all the same, felt drawn, as iron filings to lodestone, to the stillness under that canopy. But duty pinned him where he stood, Every movement below awaited his next command, though none yet dared summon him by name. And which name would they use? Footsteps approached from behind, measured, deliberate. He smelled parchment and chilled wine before the voice spoke. Tyrion Lannister rested his elbows on the battlement and exhaled, as though he'd climbed 3 flights rather than 1. His tunic was caked with what had once been crimson velvet. Now it resembled the mottled hide of an old boar. "Tell me, Lord Snow, or is it Prince Targaryen this morning? Why is it that victory always feels so damnably like defeat in the marrow of one's bones?" Jon answered without looking over. "Because what we won came wrapped in what we lost." Tyrion rolled a small stone between thumb and forefinger. "A very stark sentiment. Your father, or your uncle, whichever title we prefer, might applaud." He flipped the pebble off the wall. It clinked down onto roof tiles below. "I bring news, and none of it simple. Give me the worst first." "Always the honorable route." Tyrion folded arms. "The dead have properly died, if that is a phrase. Fires still burn across the outer field to scour any stragglers, but Grey Worm scouts report no further movement. The Night King's sorcery snapped entirely. No pockets of shambling limbs, thank the gods. On the other hand, almost a third of our Northmen are gone, and another quarter too injured to hold bow or spear for months. The Unsullied's losses stand lighter. Discipline, shields, but critical nevertheless, and they are far from Essos should reinforcements be desired. The Dothraki," he trailed off, grimacing. "Those who charged the first night at Dragonstone fares in better shape than those poor souls here." "We'll bury the dead," Jon said, though the promise tasted hollow. The ground itself was gorged with corpses, and the living had little strength left for shovels. "We will," Tyrion allowed. "But beyond graves there is the matter of what the living do next. And here enters the second shard of news." He cast a glance to the broken tower where Daenerys had landed. "The Queen wishes to see you, urgently." Jon's stomach tightened. "How fares Drogon?" "Resting. Maesters have patched what they could. Dragons mend quickly or perish outright. There seems no middle course." Tyrion rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Sir Barristan used to say the scars harden their hides." "And Rhaegal? Your lad snores loud enough to shame a war horn. Too stubborn to die. I suppose he learned that from both his riders." "So." Jon managed the ghost of a smile before it slipped. "I'll go to her," he said, turning. "See to the rebuilding lists if you can. Grain, timber, salves, and thank you, Tyrion." The dwarf raised an eyebrow. "For which part?" "Counting coffers while the ashes cool." "For being alive," Jon replied, clapping his shoulder. Then he strode down the stone stairs, boots grinding soot into the ancient cracks. Snow still drifted in languid spirals, but the flakes were thin and already melting on contact. As Jon crossed the yard, survivors paused to bow heads or press fists to hearts. He acknowledged each with small nods yet quickened pace. Too many eyes weighed upon him, each pair hoping for something: orders, comfort, absolution. He had none of those things to spare, not yet. Daenerys awaited him in a narrow antechamber off the ruined tower's base, the air inside thick with the tang of dragon blood and hot pitch. Stubs of candles guttered in wall sconces, their tallow pools teeming with dead gnats. She sat on a low stone bench where once armorers had hammered chainmail, her white silver hair unbraided, hanging in damp ropes over shoulders. A maester had bandaged her right hand. Flecks of scarlet seeped through linen. At her feet lay a piece of the Night King's broken spear, its icy edge still emitting sluggish wisps of vapor that refroze into delicate needles on the surrounding straw. When Jon entered, she looked up with eyes that seemed made of every hue sunrise had to offer: lavender, periwinkle, faint seams of gold. Neither spoke for a long beat. The silence between them felt both fragile and inexorable, like the surface of a deep lake in winter. "How long has it been since you slept?" he asked at last. She shrugged. "Sometime before dusk of the day that no longer exists." She gestured to the opposite bench. "Sit. If you fall over, the realm will need to lift 2 rulers instead of 1. He obeyed, though his muscles protested. The bench's chill seeped through leather breeches, and thawing snow still clung to his knees. "Tyrion said you had need of me." Her mouth quirked upward, though the smile couldn't hide tremor beneath. I always have need of you, Jon Snow. But yes, there is a matter. She reached into the small wooden coffer beside her and withdrew a folded parchment sealed with wax. The sigil stamped into the wax was an ornate kraken, gold on black, a raven from Pike. It arrived 3 days ago, flown first to White Harbor, then here yesterday eve. No bird could land during battle, so the maester in the rookery tucked it into her sleeve and prayed to every god she knew. She delivered it an hour ago. Nandamti. Jon frowned, breaking the seal. Ink smudged where haste had not allowed proper drying. The script, however, was unmistakably Yara Greyjoy's. Bold slashes, harsh hooks. Dragon Queen. Euron Greyjoy is dead. His silence lies rotting near the Straits of Pike. Hull split by wildfire and righteous steel. The Iron Islands are mine, and the sea itself roars for vengeance. Yet my decks are not yet dry of blood before I learn your war in the North ends. I sailed south to burn Cersei's fleet at anchor, but news claims the Lannister lion still prowls the Red Keep, fangs bared. You named me Queen of Salt and Stone, sworn to your banner. I am ready to fulfill that oath and choke the Golden Lion's cub in his cradle. My ships gather at Fair Isle within a fortnight, and the Shield Isles pledge safe harbor when the wind turns. But I will not fight a single-handed war for you. We need your dragons. Send fire, or send word that your fires will never come. The sea does not wait. Yara of House Greyjoy, rightful queen of the Iron Islands. Jon folded the parchment, thumb tracing the broken wax. The last we heard, Yara still harried Euron in the Stepstones. Now she's slain him. And sails for King's Landing? Daenerys murmured, massaging bandaged hand. She expects me to join within weeks, if not sooner. The realm's last enemy sits the throne of 10,000 swords, and the Queen of Fire is honor-bound to march. Jon exhaled. We've just survived a war that nearly broke us. The men need rest. No way. The realm cannot rest while Cersei breathes. Daenerys stood, too suddenly. Her knees buckled, and she grabbed the bench. Do you think I don't bleed for every northern boy buried this dawn? But if we wait, Cersei will summon sellsword legions. She'll dig in behind wildfire caches. The longer we tarry, the higher the mountain we must climb. Jon rose more slowly. He reached to steady her, but she bristled at aid. He let his hand fall. I know the danger, he said quietly. I fought at the Trident's Mouth when she sent scorpions to cripple Rhaegal. I won't forget. Yet marching half-healed men south through snows that still come nightly. He shook his head. Battle will kill them where the dead failed. Then what? Her voice cracked. Not anger alone, but weariness. Wait a year? 2? Let small folk think the conqueror of winter fears the lioness. Jon met her gaze. There's another path. I ride south alone, or with a small guard, parley with Cersei. She might yield when she learns the Night King is dead and all his armies with him. She cannot claim her throne is blessed by prophecy any longer. Daenerys laughed, a brittle sound. Prophecy? Cersei believes in nothing beyond her children, her power, and her hatred of anything that threatens the first two. She'll mount your head on a spike before she surrenders. Nice. Jon's jaw clenched. He turned to the doorway, where thin shafts of sun lanced the dust motes swirling in from shattered masonry. The moving light reminded him of childhood mornings at Castle Black, when new snowfall gleamed so bright it seemed an affront to gloom. You might be right, he conceded. But the North will balk at another war waged for a southern crown. Convince them we tried peace first, and they'll march with you when peace fails. Banyan Tall. Footsteps sounded outside. Grey Worm appeared, saluting. My queen, he said. Councils assemble in the Great Hall. They ask your judgment on funerals and rations. She rubbed forehead. Tell them we arrive shortly. Grey Worm bowed and withdrew. Daenerys inhaled, steadying herself. She stepped close enough that Jon felt her breath. Your voice holds sway over these lords, she said low. If you counsel delay, they will cling to it. If they cling too long, All we sacrifice becomes ash, the moment Cersei's sellswords land at Gulltown or Sunspear. Manana. Jon searched her face, the lines of fatigue bracketing her eyes, the hairline soot smudge along her jaw, the faint tremor and split lip. He remembered Bran's cryptic words. Choose love. He did not wholly understand what the boy man saw, but he felt the truth of choice pressing now. Give the living a moose turning, he said. 4 weeks. No longer. Enough to heal ribs and mend saddle girths, gather grain, and send ravens to River Run and Highgarden. Let the lords of the Reach and Riverlands declare whether they stand with the dead's vanquishers, or with a queen who did nothing while death walked. He placed his hands on her shoulders. At the new moon we ride, we ignite every hearth between here and King's Landing. Daenerys closed her eyes, weighing. Then, slowly, she nodded. 1 moon. And when we march together. Stark wolf, Targaryen dragon. Her acceptance filled him with relief so potent his knees near buckle. He leaned in, brushed lips to her brow. She sagged against him, head fitting beneath his chin, warmth of her body bleeding through damp furs. For a sliver of morning they clung. No titles, no crowns, simply 2 souls scraped raw but unbroken. A throat cleared in the corridor. Jon stepped back, cheeks heating. Sir Davos entered, half limping. Hate to darken tender moments. The Onion Knight sighed. But the great hall's filling fast, and Lord Glover's already arguing with Lady Mormont about whether to cremate strangers' corpses in sacred ground. Too many lords, too few beds. It's turning ugly quick. Jon straightened. We're coming. Davos surveyed them with knowing eyes but said nothing further, merely beckoned. As they followed, Daenerys whispered to Jon, Not one word of my or heritage among the lords today. Their hearts can hold only so many miracles before breaking. Jon squeezed her hand once. A moon's turning, he reminded. Plenty of nights to share truth. She nodded, but the flicker of apprehension that crossed her face lingered in his thoughts long after they stepped under the rent purlins of the great hall roof, where smoke still curled through missing slate and every voice within rose like bees disturbed under winter bark. The great hall, stripped of trestles for the war council and now recluttered with benches, smelled of damp wool, charred meat, and the copper bite of blood that not even sand and sawdust could mask. Lords and captains jostled beneath tattered banners. The flayed man of Bolton repurposed as berths for widowed Glover bannermen. Manderly mermaids stitched to patch holes in Karstark cloaks, splintered stanchions bearing the Lion of Lannister. Taken as spoils at Casterly Rock months earlier, now inverted to serve as makeshift crutches for a maimed Brightstone footman. Only the direwolf of Stark retained dignity, hanging above the dais, a defiant gray wolf on white edges, scorched yet unbowed. Sansa stood on that dais, flanked by Brienne of Tarth and Jon Royce. Her satin gown, once ivory, wore stains no maester's limewater would lift. Yet she still bore herself like the queen some men whispered she ought to be. Straight spine, shoulders squared, chin lifted. At her hip hung a narrow dirk with a handle of ashwood carved into intertwining wolves. The simple weapon lent her an air as formidable as any sword of Valyrian steel. She welcomed Jon and Daenerys with a level nod. The lords await your word, she said, voice even yet edged with iron. I have promised them decisions before sunset. Jon surveyed the assembly. Lyanna Mormont, face paler than the fresh linen across her arm. Lord Glover, mustache singed short, arguing with Bronze Jan about supply wagons. Gendry Baratheon, dark circles under eyes, whispering with Davos. Beyond them, Grey Worm and Missandei conferred in low Valyrian. Sam hurried between knots of healers, jotting names of the dead. A hush rippled outward as Daenerys climbed to the dais, Jon at her side. All eyes converged, hope and suspicion weaving a taut rope. Daenerys raised one hand, palm outward. The hall stilled. You fought the long night, and lived, she began, voice audible to the furthest doorway, though no herald proclaimed her. No song can hold the measure of your courage. No crown I might wear has worth that has not been forged in the fires you walked through last eve. And because you bled for me, For us, I will speak plainly and ask the same of you now." She scanned the faces. "The Night King is dust, but the realm still groans under a tyrant who sat safe behind walls while you froze in darkness. She will not yield her stolen throne through fear alone. She must see that the winds themselves carry dragon flame and northern steel to sweep her lies away. I intend to march south and finish what I began across the sea. Yet I will not command broken armies to bleed afresh without respite. So we propose this: one full turn of the moon for rest, burial, and harvest of whatever grain can yet be salvaged under frost. In that span, ravens will fly to every corner of Westeros calling banners still undecided. At the next new moon, we march." "Listen." She stepped back. Jon lifted his voice next. "During that moon's turning, every lord here will aid his neighbor, regardless of old grudges. Houses Umber and Karstark will share lumber with House Glover. House Mormont will open its granaries to the Crannogmen who came here with little more than reed spears. The Watchers on the Wall pledge surplus oats from Eastwatch stores, shipped by river barges once the ice breaks midday." He paused, letting murmurs settle. "This hall held against death itself because we stood together. Keep that wall of unity, and we'll reach King's Landing stronger than we left it." A low murmur rolled. Lord Glover rose, leaning on an iron-shod staff. "And who leads this march? We followed Queen Daenerys north because the dead threatened us all. But my men looked to Winterfell's blood before any foreign dragon. Now the dead lie quiet. Some say the north should be free again." Jon met Glover's gaze. "I hear them. Yet freedom bought by leaving others shackled to a tyrant is not freedom, it's cowardice. The war ahead is for all Westeros, not one crown." Lyanna Mormont climbed onto her bench for height. "The North does not forget," she declared, voice slicing the air. "We bent the knee to fight the long night, and the wolf keeps its oaths. House Mormont stands with Queen Daenerys and King. Lord Snow?" she faltered, cheeks reddening as uncertainty over titles echoed across benches. But her defiance set a spark. Lord Royce banged his gauntleted fist, shouting assent. Gendry raised hammer haft overhead. Slowly nods spread, some reluctant, most determined. Glover bowed stiffly. "A moon's respite then. The Glovers will ready axes." Sansa watched, expression unreadable. Only when noise subsided did she speak. "My brother's plan is sound, yet the North also remembers cost. In one moon, we must repair not merely walls but hearts. Let estranged houses mend quarrels now, else they unravel on the march. Nanda Ray, Estater." Daenerys dipped her chin. "Wise counsel." Davos cleared throat. "Then let's fix dates." He produced a waxed slate with crude marks. New moon falls 25 days hence. Funeral pyres 2 days from now to allow carving of name boards. Grain levies tallied within 10. Horses reshod by 14. Gendry smiths already at work. And by God, someone fetches fee for those dragons. Laughter rippled. Strained but real. The formal council dissolved into clusters, charting timetables. Sansa descended the dais, eyes following Jon and Daenerys as they stepped aside to confer with Varys, newly emerged from some cellar where he had weathered the battle like a spider in cracked stone. Brienne approached Sansa. "A strong pact," she murmured. Sansa's gaze stayed on her brother. "Strong," she agreed, "but glass cracks if flawed beneath the glaze." Brienne hesitated. "You speak of Jon's parentage. Of truths withheld." Sansa folded arms. "How long before whispers grow? We face one queen in the south while crowning 2 more here without naming what binds them." "Nan." "He means to reveal it," Brienne offered, though unsure. "When they believe hearts can bear it." Sansa sighed. "He waits for perfect weather. Winter teaches no such thing." The moon waned. The pyres rose. 4 great mounds ringed the field outside Winterfell, each crowned with logs stacked as thick as a cottage wall. Atop them, the dead were laid in rows, unsullied with shields crossed, Northmen in leather that still smelled of hearth smoke, Dothraki braided in death as life, maesters sprinkled oils and rare herbs, until the air itself tasted of cedar and sage. By dusk, thousands gathered, faces made ghostly by a flicker of torchlight. Jon stood at the head of the northernmost pyre, flanked by Davos and Tormund. His black cloak caught sparks that danced upward like tiny new stars seeking old constellations. He spoke of watchfires kept beyond the wall, of brothers lost whose names he alone now remembered, and of vows that ended only when life did. Davos intoned the Father's mercy, Tormund roared the old god's rough blessings. At the southern pyre, Daenerys spoke high Valyrian elegies for the Unsullied and the Dothraki. Missandei translated, voice breaking. Grey Worm knelt before lit torches, head bowed so low ash collected in the shorn hair of his nape. When Daenerys finished, she raised a torch herself. Jon mirrored her. Across the field, others did likewise. At her nod they stepped forward, touching flame to kindling. Fire leapt skyward in 4 pillars. A wind from the west bent the flames eastward, carrying sparks that vanished into dark like whispered promises. Even the dragons kept vigil. Rhaegal and Drogon perched upon the inner battlements, massive tails hanging over linen-swathed scaffolds. Their golden eyes reflected pyres like twin mirrors of hell, yet they made no sound beyond low chuffs, as if acknowledging kinship with all flesh bound for ash. The burning lasted till near dawn, embers settling into hills of red gold coals that painted the snow around them in eerie glow. No one slept that night. Some drank, others wept. Most sat in weary silence counting heartbeats. Bran remained beneath the weirwood, gaze distant. Sansa roamed among survivors, offering water, a cloak, a bare hand when words failed. Arya vanished into corridors, stalking restlessly, until even Shadowcat, the castle mouser, fled her approach. At sunrise, Jon found her on the curtain wall above the eastern ridge. She leaned upon the parapet, face pale, hood pulled low. He approached quietly. Neither spoke a long while. Couldn't watch them burn, she said at last, voice hoarse. Too many smelled like men I killed. Like he did. She meant the Night King. Jon nodded. I sometimes dream of wildlings from Hardhome. Faces half frozen, still begging. Memso. Arya's jaw flexed. We ended it. But what ends ever stay buried? Jon rubbed the stone roughness. The living remember better than the dead. She shot him a glance. You're living enough, but you forget you're not truly Stark. The words rolled like thunder. Jon swallowed. I haven't forgotten. I just plan to share later, she finished. Wry. Sansa knows. I know. Bran always knew. How long before the lords know? When hearts can bear it. Maybe they never will. She pushed off the parapet. But a hidden truth is like a blade under a cloak. You think it's safe till it's too late to draw before the blow. She strode past. He caught her sleeve. Arya, thank you. For what you tried in the Godswood. She paused, looking up at him. For the first time since childhood, he saw fear like frost beneath her irises. I failed, she whispered. If you and Daenerys hadn't been there. You bought us breath. He squeezed her hand. Breath enough to strike. That matters. She nodded stiffly, then pulled free, descending the stairs 2 at a time. Jon watched her vanish, heart heavy with riddles no sword could cut. Days passed beneath an uneasy peace. Sunlight grew bold. Snowmelt coursing through Winterfell's gutters and babbling streams. Blacksmiths hammered from dawn to dusk, repurposing shattered armor into new breastplates. Farriers lined horseshoes along blazing forges. Hatcheries overflowed with salted pork, barrels of herring carted south by White Harbor traders after ice cleared the channel. Every corridor buzzed with talk. Who would bend the knee anew? Who might betray? Whether dragons could survive the South's humid air. Ravens came daily, some from Tarth, some from Horn Hill, some from Sunspear, each scroll fanning speculation flames. On the 13th day, Jon and Daenerys broke fast with Bran and the Godswood. Snow patches lingered where boughs screened sun, but crocuses poked purple buds through slush. Bran's chair had been fitted with new spokes carved from fallen weirwood branches, giving it eerie semblance of merging with the sacred heart tree. Ghost sat watchfully nearby, muzzle resting on Bran's wheel. Daenerys sipped honeyed wine. "Your birds have flown far," she said to Bran. "Yet they return sooner than seems possible." Bran tilted his head. "Wargs travel many roads. Some wingborne." He regarded Jon. "Cersei readies wildfire beneath every major gate. Her alchemists toil even under the Sept ruins." Jon stiffened. "How many caches?" Bran's pupils dilated a moment, then focused. 17. Enough to swallow half a city. Daenerys cursed softly. "She means to torch her own capital rather than yield." "She means to torch your army once you breach the walls," Bran corrected. Jon ran fingers through hair, grown greasy from sleepless nights. "Could the dragon scour those stores from air?" "Not without igniting them," Bran replied. Daenerys inhaled, nostrils flaring. "Then we must cut her supply lines first. Starve her of grain, wood, water. Siege instead of storm." Jon considered. "A siege takes months. Summer heat will rot our food." "We have 2 living furnaces," she countered. "Dragons scorch enemy fields, not ours. The people inside will suffer." "They chose her," Daenerys said coldly, then softened at Jon's look. "Or they allowed her. But I will not burn them if another path exists." "Nah." Bran's fingers brushed weirwood bark. "Another path always exists, though it may not comfort the walker." He turned to Jon. "You bear a secret that could unseat both Cersei and Daenerys without a blade drawn." Daenerys' head snapped. "He will not." Jon held up a hand. "Bran, no." Bran's gaze seemed to see centuries. "Truth longs to breathe, Jon." "Enough," Daenerys said, rising. "We came for counsel, not prophecy disguised as blackmail." Bran watched her stand. "I offer neither. I only see branches of what may come. Secrets are seeds. They sprout in darkness, crack stone, and one day reach sunlight regardless." "Mystigmain." Jon placed a palm on Bran's knee. "I will speak when time is right." "So said many kings," Bran murmured, then smiled oddly. "When you ride south, bring Arya. Her road still bends toward shadows not yet born." Daenerys' expression revealed impatience mingled with a flick of unease. She bowed stiffly. "Thank you, Bran." She strode off, cloak brushing crocuses. Jon lingered. "What shadows?" Bran looked to the heart tree's carved face. "An assassin who names herself Kindness. A boy with dragon glass in his chest who does not yet exist. A song sung by a lion cub to lull a wolf. Choose love, Jon. Else we repeat the night another way." "Daman." Jon absorbed the riddles with sigh. "I'll try, brother." He left, ghost padding at heel. On the 18th day, clouds massed heavy and steel gray. A late squall rolled down from the shivering sea, blasting Winterfell with wet sleet that hammered rooftops like arrows return. In the great hall's upper gallery, Sansa convened her own private council. Brienne, Arya, Maester Walken, and Sir Glover. 2 guards at the stair kept eavesdroppers at bay. Sansa unrolled a map of the King's Road. "Reports from our riders confirm plague pockets along the Green Fork. Coughing sickness, likely from decaying bodies of the dead. If we march entire hosts through, we risk contagion." Brienne traced alternate route. "The road east of Moat Cailin remains passable. Longer by a week, but keeps us clear of corpses." Arya leaned back, boots sully tapping railing. "Fine for infantry, but wagons will sink in neck wetlands." "We lighten wagons," Glover said, though he scowled at wedding numbers. "Means men carry shields on backs." Sansa studied the map. "I'll instruct every house to forge additional litters, and we send outriders ahead with lime to burn plague pits." Maester Walken cleared throat. "We also need a remedy store. Colloidal silver, dog rose, honey salve." "Arrange it," Sansa said. She looked to Arya. "Find hot pie in the kitchens. He's baked enough loaves for an army once. Put him in charge of travel rations." Arya's eyebrow arched. "Hot pie is here?" "Arrived this dawn with 3 carts," Sansa replied. Said the inn at the crossroads felt lonely. Arya cracked half-smile. "I'll see him." "One other matter." Sansa drew a smaller parchment. A raven from Bear Island yesterday evening. The castle stands intact, but Lyanna's maester alleges Selsails landing on Cape Kraken wearing Lannister red cloaks mixed with Golden Company stripes. Scouts counted 8 ships. Glover cursed. Cersei buying footholds already. Rienne frowned. If she wins the Iron Banks purse, more will follow. Sansa folded arms. Jon must learn now. Arya pushed off railing. I'll tell him. Sansa grabbed her wrist gently. In private. And remind him. Speed matters more than our bruises. Arya nodded, slipping away into shadows as deftly as a childhood rumor. The squall pounded the roof above Jon's lean-to quarters when Arya found him hunched over a rough table, sharpening Longclaw with glacial focus. Sparks leapt each time Whetstone ate steel. He did not look up until she slid the Bear Island raven under his left hand. Bad news never waits, he muttered, opening scroll. As he read, his shoulders tensed. Selsails on Cape Kraken. If they secured Deepwood Motte, they could flank us before we even crossed the neck. Then... Stark men hold Deepwood, Arya reminded. Fewer than 200, he replied. It cannot stand against a company of elephants and heavy crossbows. She shrugged. Then we strike first. You, me, a dozen sword singers, whatever your title commands. He smiled despite gloom. It's tempting, little sister, but if I leave Winterfell now, rumor will sprout heads. The king flees north. The wolf deserts the dragon. All manner of folly. Still, he set Whetstone aside. We will send a raven tonight. Deepwood's men must booby-trap the cape. And I'll speak to Theon. Ironborn sails could intercept. Then, Arya perched on a stool, turning a throwing knife between fingers. Rain drummed the eaves. I've seen how you look at her. Jon paused. Who? Daenerys. She slid steel back into boot. You want to tell the realm, but you worry truth will break everything you've built. He sighed. If the North forsakes me, Daenerys loses northern spears. If I silence the truth, I betray my father. Both of them. Either path costs someone's faith. Arya tilted her head. Maybe there's a third path. Tell only those who matter most. Let them decide how the tale spreads. Neither is see. I tried that with Sansa. It ended in whispers anyway. Then trust the right whispers. She rose, hand on his shoulder. You were never just dark, never just snow. You're the thread tying wolf and dragon. Threads break if stretched hidden. Wound them into rope, they hold ships. He touched her hand. You've grown wise. I've grown tired of burying secrets, she said. And of burying brothers. Her eyes softened. Don't make me bury you because lords doubt a bastard's crown. Jon covered her fist with both hands. I won't. He inhaled. Resolve. Tomorrow I'll speak to the lords here, with Daenerys. Tell them whose blood flows in me. Let them choose their allegiance in daylight. Arya studied him, as though measuring steel grade, and nodded. Good, she said, and stepped into rain. Jon watched water cascade off the lintel, each drop seeming a heartbeat counting down to dawn. Dawn came shrouded, a gray veil drawn across Sun's face. In the great hall, every bannerman, maester, shield-bearer, and free rider mustered by order. Torches flared, despite day's hour. Rumor buzzed. New threat? Fresh march? But when Jon and Daenerys ascended the dais, a hush, as heavy as grave moss, settled. Jon raised no sword or scroll. He spoke plainly. You know me as Lord of Winterfell, son of Eddard Stark. He glanced to Daenerys, saw her slight nod. The world knows me also as the man who bent the knee to Queen Daenerys Stormborn. But blood writes truth deeper than ink. My mother was Lyanna Stark. My father was Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. Gasps rippled. Someone cursed. Ser Barbary Dustin fainted. Jon lifted a hand. I learned this only after my vow to her. I kept silent to spare the realm turmoil as death loomed. But death has passed, and truth must breathe. Then so. Daenerys stepped forward, voice clear. Let no whisper claim I coerce this. I knew before the long night and accepted Jon's silence for the realm's sake. Now, I stand beside him still, queen in my right and ally to the rightful heir of Aegon the Conqueror. Murmurs swelled. Lord Glover glared, knuckles white on staff. Brienne's eyes widened, but she held stoic. Sam Tarly, in the rear, nodded solemnly. Jon continued, I do not claim throne of 7 kingdoms. I fought for the living, not a crown. Yet lineage binds me to this fight. I will march south for one purpose, to help Queen Daenerys end Cersei's tyranny. Follow me if you will, or name me bastard still, and hold your lands. I ask only that those who stay behind protect the north if we fall. Cersei's silence stretched, brittle. Then Lyanna Mormont's small voice rang. All my life I've known bastards can be truer than lords. Rhaegar's blood or not, Jon Snow fought and bled for Bear Island's daughters. The shield we raised for him stands yet. She turned to Daenerys. And the Dragon Queen kept her promise of fire against the dead. Bear Island follows both. Jon Royce thumped breastplate. The Vale too. One by one lords declared. Some hesitated, but none withdrew. Even Glover bowed neck stiffly. Stout hearts follow proven steel. Though his eyes glittered uncertainty, the staff he planted echoed assent. Jon exhaled, tension sliding from shoulders. Daenerys squeezed his hand, a subtle gesture beneath furs. Only Sansa's face remained unreadable. Yet after long pause she said, The North stands. Jon caught flicker of reluctant pride in her eyes. The hall erupted. Cheers, hammering mugs, swords clanged on shields. Tyrion declared, "So passes the last breath of secrecy." Varys murmured, "And here begins the longest game." Jon felt a rush of relief mingled with dread. Truth freed, but its wings carried unknown storms. That night, high atop the tower where Maester Luwin once kept his observatory, Daenerys and Jon gazed out across an army camp stirred to new vigor. Torchlines traced training grounds. Standards snapped in crisp northern wind. Dragons dozed on warm stone stacks, their wounds scabbed to onyx ridges. Below, lords shared kegs. Dothraki raced horses through muddy lanes. Laughter like thunder. "They accepted," Daenerys said, wonder in tone. "For now," Jon answered. "Faith can flicker." She stepped closer, fingers brushing his. "One moon's turning used. 7 days remain. We break weather or bones to meet them." She rested head on his shoulder. Together. Snowflakes drifted from a sky peppered with stars at last visible through shredding clouds. Jon thought of threads, of rope binding ship to dock, of shadows Bran foresaw. He wrapped arm around her waist. "Together," he echoed, and for a heartbeat the night felt still, the future malleable as gold at forge. Yet far to the south, in a tower of red stone, Queen Cersei Lannister paced crimson carpets. She traced the rim of a goblet filled not with arbor red, but wildfire green liquid that shimmered as though alive. Outside her window, the harbor of King's Landing bustled with fresh galleys flying a golden elephant on blue Dalton. And in the dungeons below, Qyburn oversaw men shaping scorpion bolts, tipped with blackened steel etched with runes of dragonglass, recovered from ships that had run aground near Valyria years ago. Each bolt he placed in cedar crate bore a single word burned above its latch. "Gift." Cersei smiled at the river flame in her goblet, raised it to catch candlelight. "Let the North march," she whispered to the wildfire's glow. "Let the last dragon come." She sipped, lips painting green. A queen eats fire for breakfast. In the distance, a bell tolled midnight, and the long game truly began.